Hello, class. Today I'm going to be talking to you about Civil War reenactments. The reason we do Civil War reenactments is to show our history of what we know and probably what they went through in that time. Now, back then, they had cannons, horse riding, and they had guns. They had Springfield rifles, and they had pistols. Now, these had gunpowder attached to them. They didn't have the bullet casings that we have today in our guns. And it took about 3 minutes for someone to shoot off a cannon about 6 times. A good cannon crew was able to shoot off 3 rounds a minute, and they had about 9 to 10 people running them. They have one person for each specific job of the cannon to make sure it runs smoothly and efficiently. The rifles, it took them about 45 seconds to get off a round. And that's a long time for each round in between, the opportunity for the opposing side to shoot at you. And then you having to load, you have that fear of getting caught. Now, the reason why we do Civil War reenactments is also to show people what it was really about. It wasn't just about the fighting, and it wasn't about slavery. It was about states' rights, of why the North and the South wanted to be equal, but they had very big differences. Now, how they lived was very different than how we live today. They had tents that they had to move around, or log cabins if they were stationary. And they were not having running water or heating and all that, so they would use paper across the walls for insulation during the winter. And their water, they would either go to a river or they would dig a well themselves and put a bucket up and down. Now, what they ate was whatever they caught out there in the fields or they were hunting. Now, if they had chickens, they were able to have eggs. And most of the time, they ate chicken and rabbit and snakes and all those kinds of animals. Now, the benefits of the reenacting is that you're getting a more broad understanding of what happened out there on the fields and in that lifestyle. Now, I love doing it because I'm around people who have a passion for history. I am a history buff to the T. I love anything and everything about our history, whether it's for our country or for other countries. It is very important because that's what made us into this world we are today. Now, our next understanding of what we're going to be going through is a sense of what they went through. Now, most of the time, these people weren't able to go around and have cell phones or anything like that. They would have to walk or ride a cart to where they needed to go because there was no cars or anything in this era. Now, today, we have cars, airplanes, all sorts of technology to where we can get a hold of one another. But back then they would write letters, or they would go and walk and see their neighbors and talk to them or converse. Or they'd go to town hall meetings or city conventions and just be able to have a town fair and all that type of stuff. That way they can understand and still be a community. And in my pictures here, we have a cannon firing and a Confederate soldier holding their Confederate flag proudly as they're in this one battle. And down here in this bottom corner, we have a man about to fire a cannon off at other people on the opposing side. And this picture right here is the tent to show what kind of lifestyle it would look like when these soldiers were camping out on the fields. Now, why is it important to react? It is very important to reenact because we want to give the younger and lower crowds an understanding of what went on in this pastime. It is very important to us as history buffs to understand that if it wasn't for this Civil War, a lot of our privileges we have today would not be here. People understand it's like, oh, it's just about slavery and it was because we were holding slaves in the southern states. That wasn't the case. Back then in the southern states, 75% of the people never owned a slave. And out of the 25% that did, 20% only had one slave. 4% had 1 to 10, and the other 1% had over 10. Now, there were some cases where there was considered abuse on some of them with Harriet Beecher Stowe's book, Uncle Tom's Cabin. Now, that book illustrated her uncle's plantation that she had and slaves that were being abused. But the only problem is that Harriet Beecher Stowe never went to her uncle's plantation. It was just rumors from what she was hearing and about her father saying how slaves were bad, and it led her to writing that book. And that book in that era in 1860 sold second to the Bible because people were thinking that every plantation owner in the southern states was abusing their slaves. And back then that wasn't the case because they needed help with the land that they had in order to bring the crops in and all of that stuff. It is very important that we reenact history. It's because we need to know why they fought for what they did. And if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be standing here today. It would be a totally different country. and we would not be able to have such freedom as we do now.